the RBFCU playbook for adopting FDX and open banking to elevate consumer experiences.
Thanks, Buddha. Thanks for joining, Ross. Again, your session at LeapX Finance was so well attended, and we had so many follow-up questions that we, decided we needed to have you back and to have you explain a little bit more on how you were able to so quickly adopt FDX and elevate your member experience here. And let me just go to the slide. Obviously, that picture was years ago for me because now I have white hair.
We have a little less now too. Yeah.
So Ross is a senior solution architect at RBFCU. Again, thanks for coming. And I believe Buddha is going to put up a poll before we get started. Let's see if it pops up to everybody. All right, I can't answer that. So everybody, you can take your time answering that question. And in the meantime, we are going to start more with the deep dive here with Ross. And so Ross, can you take a few moments and really explain why open banking? And did you actually call it open banking when you started it? Right.
Yeah, funny. It probably started more as a let's stop screen scraping and seeing the problems with people wanting to connect in third-party apps, fintech, personal management applications, and the only avenue they had to do so was through screen scraping. And we'll certainly get into a lot of the issues with screen scraping around the security, members needing to share their credentials, and visibility problems. So I think our initial pain point was around finding a better option there. And then the more we dug into how this is accomplished, seeing emerging standards and really strategies for doing this, we weren't needing to reinvent the wheel. We didn't need to invent the wheel. There are ways and standards across the ecosystem that really made this possible. So open banking for us then became, okay, let's make sure we're in alignment with how and what the industry is doing. And then that led our path more to what parts of open banking we would really work on.
Very
So
good.
go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say for the folks, please, if you have a question, put it in the chat, and I will try to field them as good as I can. So
Yeah.
sorry to
Yeah, I'll speak a
interrupt.
bit more just on the why. So certainly there was a problem point that we had with the security implications, particularly around screen scraping. So that's when a person wants to connect in and use their RBFCU or their financial institution accounts in a different system. And typically, how that was done in the past is you'd go to that third-party application or website, and to connect your accounts from your bank or credit union, you would enter your bank or credit union credentials and detail into that other system. So naturally, we as a financial institution can't condone that. We don't want people sharing their usernames, passwords. Those should only be used on our site. And from a user, personally using these for personal finance management, for account aggregation, I don't want to give my credentials to elsewhere. So one of the reasons for doing this is a secure exchange of data, really being able to do this in a way that is better to the member, better to the organization. And then from the third-party applications, they don't need to worry about security in the same sense of saving credentials, that type of thing. And then ultimately, it's a better visibility and control mechanism that is provided to the user. So the user is able to control what gets shared, how it's shared, and ultimately have an easier path to see when it's accessed, be able to revoke access, and be able to ultimately be in control of their data. It is their accounts, their information. So that's certainly the side to the user. We saw strategic and certain importance to us as an organization. With screen scraping, it's very tough to identify what type of applications are being used. So is it really needing to dig through almost system level logs to see, okay, was this a real user or was this a bot aggregator scraping our site? So we lost visibility or really had a difficult time around visibility and as a result then aren't able to address what pain points users go to these other services for. If those are services that make sense for us to bring and deliver first party natively to users, that's something we really care about. If people are using their accounts and using their money in ways that really indicate a gap, say for lending or for deposit accounts or whatever on the financial institution side, we have a gap if we can't understand how and where to best serve the member. So there's certain reasons that apply to both the users and organizations, and I think they really go hand in hand to really take a concerted effort to make this a priority for our organization.
I've got a couple questions in the chat. One, do you still support screen scraping? And loan providers are still using services that only appear to leverage scraping.
Yes, great question. So we have partnered with 3 or 4 large aggregators that constitute the majority of our um, traffic for these type of third-party applications. And onboarding each of them is a little bit of kind of a migration. Think of it where you're enabling open banking and the FDX standard for your set of users. Each of these aggregators have the ability to then kind of phase traffic out and switch users over from screen scraping, and users will reconnect their accounts through open banking instead of screen scraping. And so when that's done, we aren't there perfectly 100% yet where we've been able to shut off screen scraping in the sense of prevent that as a mechanism. But the evolution path is such. We plan around a couple months or so per aggregator. And to the second part of the question, how to handle the majority, are we're still understanding the best way to approach that problem too. I'd say we identified probably 80 to 90% of the aggregator or third-party application type of traffic. And as and when we get to that last, few percentages or 10%, where it's maybe an aggregator that doesn't yet implement open banking or hasn't yet adhered to that standard, we would probably in more direct contact with them, determine timeline around that, and ultimately determine risk and implication of keeping that open and the impact to members. So that wouldn't be a change we'd probably just flip off overnight. There'd probably be more concerted communication around that in forming members of, hey, this legacy type of system is going away. We haven't been able to work with those partners or they're in work, and ultimately minimize overall disruption would be the goal.
Thank you for answering that. Um, I've got a question myself, actually. There's more coming in, but was there a definitive moment when the RBFCU decided that, you know what, we can't wait any longer for solving this problem. We need to do this now. I mean, was it led from the technical team or was it led from the business? Where?
Yeah. I think I'm fortunate to be on a team that organizationally we do drive a lot of initiatives. So I know that might be different than other organizations. IT is more a cost center, and business units drive the initiatives. We saw this as a strong importance for the cost of maintaining um, the cost maintaining of screen scraping was something that we wanted to really address. And so it came and arose as a technical initiative. We'll get into how we were successful in building support for that case and really driving the project overall. It wasn't a tough sell to then work with our security teams and show the rationale and risk with the current state of the land. And
Mhm.
ultimately, we were able to sell it as a member added service. It's technical, yes. It's a secure enhancement, yes. But the goal at the end of the day is we see a continued rise in people taking and consuming data in platforms that they want. We want to enable that and giving users the ultimate say in their data and their control was we want to think member first. We aren't doing things just for technical sake, but the ultimate goal being to the member. So it does coincide a bit with there was discussions. Ironically, it was after we had kind of started the U.S. regulation and legislation. There was some stops and starts for sure with that. We had envisioned that there would be oncoming legislation that would require this. So we felt well poised and ready to be in position that we had already accomplished this. That's since slowed down some. So our initial effort, thankfully, wasn't dependent just on legislation. Though I do think that's a consideration for people to think about long term. I do envision this will be in the US anyway, coming along and eventually a requirement for organizations, financial institutions in the same way it is in Europe and some of the other systems.
All right. We could spend a lot of time on the why. Let's talk about, getting everybody, you started talking about it wasn't hard to get buy-in. But who are the key stakeholders that you had to get this buy-in from?
Sure. Yep. And these items will really come from, in our experience, where we ended up spending more effort or more time than expected. So I put technical last. Certainly, there's going to be stakeholders around your API team or your API partner, making sure that you have APIs in that can expose data, retrieve account information, retrieve transactions, et cetera. So I don't want to say that's not a key item. For us, the complexity really lied more in the legal and vendor management side and a compliance side. And part of the reason for that is, at least for RBFCU, this was really a new foyer into a type of relationship with aggregators that we hadn't faced before. Meaning it's not really a first party agreement with an aggregator where they're taking data and we're using them directly. It's not really even a second or third party because they're almost intermediary and brokering a connection between the user, the third party fintech or personal finance application, and then us as the provider of that data. So it took a fair bit of time, I think, for our legal, which they've done a great job, and our vendor management team really understanding what this use case was. And it's also taking time to making sure that they're comfortable with what this looks like. REFCU is cautious and in a good way. We don't want this to cause issues with what's being done in the product or in the solution. So a new form of risk, a new form of management, onboarding there took time. You're going to need to wait and work through this. I think sitting down regularly with your teams, if your legal teams or vendor management teams are willing to meet with different aggregators. The aggregators we've worked with so far have been very agreeable to work through this. Um, Consulting third party or uh, outsourcing some of the legal could help for experts in that space. All of that was something that we knew would be part of it, but maybe not the extent of it. The other is a compliance thing. So when and how users are going to onboard and sign up for, connecting their accounts, sharing their data, there's important compliance and from a regulatory side, even making sure that people are aware what they're doing with their data. So it's an improvement in the sense that there was no compliance, legal, whatever with screen scraping, in that people just went and did it if they wanted. But when we now, as an organization, are standing behind this and giving them a mechanism to do it, we want to make sure they're appropriately informed and being able to make the right decisions for what data they can share, giving them ability to unshare or revoke access. So both those teams, we've worked with and had good relationships organizationally with those, but I would say they're very key in the sense of the time commitment that they might need to take for an effort for open banking.
You know, you mentioned creating those bilateral agreements between the aggregators and even your third party. That is a huge challenge that we're seeing
Yeah.
across the industry. It's one of the things that was lacking for clarity in the 1033 regulation.
Yep.
And there is a huge, I believe, a huge need for standardization of those bilateral lateral agreements, especially to help the smaller and near term, the
Right.
smaller vendors in this place. All right, so now we're going to go into the details and technical details, and we could spend hours on this. So we're gonna try to answer as many questions as possible, but really, how how did you plan for adoption? How did you do this?
Right. Yep. The best way, I mean, that we try and do for any problem, any solution is how can we break down this problem into small components, right? How do we iterate? We want to work in an agile, iterative fashion, and this is a problem that you really need to do the same with if you try and bite the whole elephant in one bite, not possible. So a few specific ways we did that is identifying common use cases for how people share data and having that drive at least our initial phases of release. So for example, when someone signs up for their access and consent, meaning they want to take their accounts at RBFCU and share them in a third-party app, there's the question of, okay, how much granularity do you give the user? Do you let them select individual accounts? Do you give them really granular access on what type of information? And the sky's the limit as far as how much you want to do. But we also saw the majority of use cases, people are wanting to essentially get all their accounts into another system. So we saw that as the first blush at attempt, and certainly we'll be revisiting that as we continue monitoring data. But something like that, I think, helps you draw a line in the sand of, okay, minimum viable product versus nice to have and want to have. We also really focused on what types of data are most utilized by these other types of third-party apps or personal finance management tools. And it's a shockingly small amount of APIs that you can deliver, really thinking around the high level, loading account information, loading some transactions. There's some around statements, etc. You can get way more advanced into additional types of non-read only type of access where people can give access, and a third-party app could do transactional type data on your behalf outside of your organizational app. And that's certainly an evolution that we'll consider, but we saw really the majority of people wanting to use these for financial planning, for consolidation, for understanding their finances in ways that we in a desired way, see the real value of third-party apps providing. So ways to get started with that, I think, is there's a few specific subsets of the financial data exchange specification. The whole specification is maybe, I think, hundreds of APIs, but there's a subset. One I'll call out is the core exchange. I believe Plaid is a player for that. Reviewing that really helped us understand, okay, what are the critical APIs that are most important to spend time on for implementation? And then lastly, for how we broke up even technical work, splitting focused efforts into the different parts of the problem. We saw uh, our API access and our authentication to those APIs as two distinct problems. That really helped us cater and focus on a specific problem, engage with a specific other data teams, our security team, or et cetera, um, in a different use case. And same for development, but even just onboarding for what a user experience looks like. That's a lot more on the compliance side and dealing with maybe a digital experience team or branding. So it allows you to really focus in and get strategic and specific on a particular problem if you can segment overall parts of the problem. And that helped us from the beginning. We were able to really hit the ground running with a clear resource for each of those and have good success with the overall effort.
So when you broke it down, you just kind of reiterate what you said. You broke it down by looking at the use case that you're going to tackle.
Yep.
From there, you went and from that use case, you basically broke down and said, okay, well, these are the APIs and the data elements that we need to map. Was your data all in one location? Was it in one core system? Was it in, because a lot of financial institutions I speak with, their data is several in several systems.
Yeah. I think we were fortunate. So we had some APIs that aligned somewhat with the endpoints that we were targeting for loading accounts. We had a primary account type API where we didn't have alignment was with thinking of like account types or subtypes, the classification or coding of accounts. There was a fair bit of mapping that we had to go through there. We did have some work where we had to pull from multiple systems. If you have a development team, certainly being able to do that and pull that in for your API layer as possible. But there are solutions that can work in this space. An API gateway, certainly Tyke, you can use for essentially having an API entry and that behind the scenes pulling from multiple locations, kind of a brokering that. So think of this not just as a pure development problem, but it could be an API delivery problem, being able to pull the fields, map or transform data and deliver them as needed. So I think we were fortunate. I mean, maybe to answer your question, the majority of our data is housed in our core product, our core banking system that our online banking and our APIs are powered by. But that's not to say that it's a must, and there's certainly ways and strategies to minimize effort while still meeting a minimum viable product.
Right. So when you did the mapping, when you looked at the schema for FDX and what your data elements were, what was it difficult to understand the semantics of what each field meant? How long did it really take you to do that particular data mapping exercise? Did you use like just a spreadsheet? Did you use a tool?
Yeah, good
How
question.
did you do that?
There was good specifications that we could see from the expected versus current. I'd say that the difficulty wasn't in understanding the concepts or translating it. It was more just accounting for maybe scenarios that our organization handles a little differently or doesn't really handle in the same way as the FDX. So, for example, when loading transactions, we for pending or yet not yet posted transactions don't have a clear identifier that we can identify those uniquely that then
Mhm.
is preserved for when that transaction posts. So something like that, for example, it's a business decision and an ultimate value add. Okay, is pending transactions of high value to the ultimate user, and something like that. I think you could say, okay, again, let's not get lost in the complexity of the problem overall. 80% scenario is probably looking at people's already posted and completed transactions. So minimize the stress that you and your teams have to go through. If you can come back and say, okay, are we accounting for a smaller type of scenario that it's good, we want to handle it, but we could always revisit it after an initial launch and initial release and really see and react based on reactions and feedback from users as well.
So the FDX specification is extensible. Did you extend it in any way, or did you try to stick as close as possible to the elements and properties that are there?
Yeah, we're trying to align our APIs to the FDX standards, where applicable, where approachable. In some ways, we're even going forward when designing APIs for our products going forward. It's made our API design and review process easier because we have a starting point for something that might already be solved. We're not needing to have a
Yeah.
developer start from scratch, have that go through a review with a lead or an architect. It's really, I think, will accelerate and allow us to be more consistent from the beginning, as opposed to, again, reinventing the wheel, which takes time and money.
Part of the playbook, and I like how you guys have broken it down, right? Solve for your 80% of your scenario. Just find the business case and implement what you need for that business case. Don't try to tackle the whole specification at once. With that said, I'd like to ask, I see there's multiple layers that you can adopt when actually adopting the consent. The ultimate being the fine-grained consent, where users can actually determine each individual account that they have access to. But there's ways to get there that I'm seeing. You can do like all, just a select all, or some there's steps that you can get there. Did you go all the way to the fine-grained consent management based on user accounts, or did you do some other step process to get there?
We haven't gotten granular and released changes for granular account selection or granular data within an account. That's something we're continuing to monitor, and we'll be seeing more and more as we onboard individual aggregators. That's something that we don't want to spend a ton of effort on and develop in a box and not have good input from users. So we're fortunate to have a very competent, very strong digital experience team that works with feedback from users and analyzes input from users in a variety of ways. And so this is something that I think we would probably engage more with users and understand their use cases before spending a ton of time on it. But certainly we do see that as an evolution and continued expansion of getting people the data they want in their control, and really the data, only the data they want.
So I believe we're up on time, but I'm wondering if Buddha will let me ask one more question for you. This is a question I think it's important to understand. You've got the data, you've got the APIs, the APIs that you need to implement for your use case. You've determined the consent level that you're going to adopt. The next thing is the security, and there's multiple different ways to implement the security, from being basic level 1 all the way to experts, level 5. Let's call FAPI level 5. Do you want to discuss how you tackled the security question?
Yep. So part of the security, there's in onboarding and initial authentication, the kind of think of it as a handshake between you and the aggregator for establishing trust once a user consents. We were able to, because we had a solution and in our online banking where we were controlling that onboarding consent flow, we could handle some of that security ourselves. We had have existing mechanisms where we can require two-factor authentication for people to confirm before access is given. Aside from the onboarding and consent side, we standardize on what I think is a pretty practical API security layer. So once a connection is established, under the hood, there's authorization that the aggregators are providing. We're generating user-specific. The goal is that we have user-specific access from the aggregator. So we want to know they're just not just crawling for hundreds of people, but we want to know who they're requesting data for. And that's ultimately for better visibility on the users and for the user's sake to know what the aggregators are doing with their data. So there are certainly multiple levels. It's something that we're keeping an eye on. There's emerging kind of even consent flows that are being built into the platform as a whole. Unknown on if and how we'll get to those in the near future, but we certainly care about the security and want to make sure that we'll be in line with what's needed. It's worth mentioning too, something like this for people who are developing or building a solution like this. We organizationally, when we hit critical releases like this, we work with our security testing firms, whether that's third party or in-house, and having them review standards and best practices. Always recommended, especially when you're talking around data being accessible and data leaving, in some sense, the immediate purview of your organization. Bring in someone else to help alleviate or validate your approach and give you confidence in the solution.
All right. Well, thank you so much again. And if you have questions, feel free to send them to us, and we'll help get them for you.
Thank you so much, Ross. Thank you so much, Laura, for moderating the session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ross.
Bye-bye.